Chapter 1, Lesson 3, Properties of Numbers. Go ahead and pause here and write down these properties, and then unpause it when you're ready to take the notes. So the first one we have is the commutative property, and it works for addition and multiplication only. And we remember the commutative property is called the switching property. So what that says is I can take any number and add a second number to it. And when I switch the order of the numbers, I will still get the same answer. So for example here, 7 plus 3 is the same as 3 plus 7. It also works for multiplication. So 7 times 3 is 21, and 3 times 7 is still 21. So it does not work for subtraction because 7 minus 3 is 4, but 3 minus 7 is negative 4. So those are not equal. And it also does not work for division. The second one is the associative property. And when we think of associative, we think of an association or like a group of people. So we call this the grouping property. And so the grouping symbols I'm going to be using are parentheses. So 1 plus 2 grouped with a 3 behind it would be the same as grouping the 2 plus 3 with the 1 in front. So notice I did not change the order of the numbers. It still says 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. What I changed was where the grouping symbols were. So in this first example here, 1 plus 2 is 3, plus another 3 is 6. On the second example, 2 plus 3 is 5, plus 1 is still 6. 1 times 2 is 2, times 3 is 6. 2 times 3 is 6, then times 1 is 6. So again, it works for addition and multiplication, does not work for subtraction or division. The next one is the identity properties. And so when you want to identify something, you want to keep their identity, you don't want to change it. So if I take 7 and I add something to it, I want it to go back to 7. I want it to keep its identity. Well, the only number I can add to keep the identity would be 0. For multiplication, if I want to times 7 by something but keep its identity, I would times it by 1. Go ahead and pause again and write these and unpause when you're ready. Inverse property of addition is kind of thinking about doing the opposite. So you want to invert something and get it back to 0. So what could I add to 7 to get it back to 0? And the answer is negative 7. For multiplication, you're asking yourself, what can I times 7 by to get it back to 1? And the answer is 1/7. So if you check that in your calculator, you do 7 times 1/7, it will get you back to 1. Distributive property is one you're probably more familiar with. So if I have 3 on the outside of a parenthesis and x plus 2 on the inside, the distributive property says to multiply the number on the outside to everything on the inside. So this would become 3x plus 3 times 2, which is 6. And the substitution property we did in Chapter 1, Lesson 2. So just a reminder, if x equals 3, and I have the equation x plus 4, I would rewrite it as 3 plus 4. So I'm substituting the x in for 3. Also, what we're going to see today is if I combine numbers. So let's say I had 3 times 2 plus 7, and on the next line I write 6 plus 7. Well, all I did was combine these and then put the number in. That would also be a substitution example. And then if I combine these and write a final answer of 13, that is also a substitution example. So the first one says 6 plus 0 equals 6. That would be the identity property. Number 2, notice the order of the numbers stays the same, negative 7, 4, 1. What changes is the grouping symbols are first around the 7 and the 4, and then on the second one, they're around the 4 and the 1. That is the associative property. Number 3, 8 plus 43 equals 43 plus 8. All they did was switch the numbers around, so that is the commutative property. Number 4, 1 times 21 keeps it as 21. It keeps its identity. Number 5, the parentheses are first around the 6 and the 7, and now they're around the 7 and the 9, so it is associative. Number 6, 24 times 81 equals 81 times 24, commutative. Number 7, 5 times a fifth goes back down to 1. They inversed each other. And number 8 takes 7 times 4 and then 7 times 2, you distributed. Now we're going to use these properties in evaluating expressions. So my original expression is written here at the top. So that's the original problem in the book. 4c plus 3 times 2 plus c. And on the next step, they have written 4c still. Instead of the 3 parenthesis 2 plus c, they wrote 6 plus 3c. So what they did for step A is they distributed. Now in B, they have still 4c, but they have changed or switched the order of the 6 and the 3c, so they used commutative property. And then for step C, they combined 4c and 3c to be 7c, so they took out the 4c and the 3c and instead put in 7c would be substitution. Here's the original problem here. And I see from the original into step A, I still have the 2, the 3, the 5, the 1, the 14. And the only change is instead of 4 times a fourth, they have 1. So what property for A says that 4 times a fourth is 1? Inverse. For B, they have the 2, the 3, but instead of 5 times 1, they say that equals 5. Identity. For C, they have 3 times 5 equals 15. Substitution. For part D, they distributed the 2. And for part E, they took 2 times 15 and instead wrote 30, and 2 times 14 and instead wrote 28, which is substitution. And it's missing F, which was the final answer of 1, and that would also be by substitution, because 30 minus 28 is 2, minus 1 is 1. Some toll highways assess tolls based on where a car entered and exited. The table below shows the highway tolls for a car entering and exiting at a variety of exits. Assume that the toll for the reverse direction is the same. Running an errand, Julio travels from exit 8 to exit 5. What property would you use to determine the toll? So this one is saying if he enters on 5 and exits at 8, it's 50 cents. And up here it says assume the toll for the reverse direction is the same. So if he gets on at 8 and off at 5, it's still 50 cents. And that is by commutative property. Annika goes on a walk every day in order to get the exercise her doctor recommends. If she walks at a rate of 3 miles per hour for 1/3 of an hour, she will have walked 3 times a third miles. Evaluate the expression. So 3 times a third is 1. And tell me what property that is. Inverse. At a local school supply store, a highlighter costs $1.25, a ballpoint pen costs 80 cents, and a spiral notebook costs $2.75. Use mental math and the associative property of addition to find the total cost if each one of each item is purchased. So with the associative property, it's asking which ones would you group together if you wanted to do mental math? Well, we would group the quarters, the 3 quarters and the 1 quarter there together and put the 80 cents on the outside. So using mental math for this would give me $4 and a total of $4.80.